Thank you, and thank you, Vice-Chancellor, for what was an incredibly eloquent statement of things that I think that we have been hearing and that we have been seeing happen in Adelaide, and it was nice, really lovely to have it all come together. I'm certainly a long-standing believer that place is critical and a critical part of economic development as well. As CEO of Renew Adelaide, and we leveraged vacant property to provide opportunities to startups, to bars, to retailers, cafes, events, and more to other kinds of businesses. I remember early on people saying, you know, isn't this just lipstick on a pig for the economy? What's more bars got to do with it? But I think we've been thoroughly vindicated now, and even in what the Vice-Chancellor has just said, around having a place that people want to be is actually critical to driving a whole lot of other industry. It's critical to attracting business, it's critical to attracting students and education, it's critical to attracting tourists. And so I'm really pleased to see that that's been adopted. And certainly, I was CEO of Renew Adelaide for 4 years, and that role is now held by Tim Boundy. But I have certainly, around Australia, been working and talking to other governments and to other industry who are looking to copy the example of the transition that Adelaide has been through as a city for the last few years. And I think it's really important that we keep doing that and that we don't rest on that we continue to drive that we continue to look for ways to make the city vibrant, that we keep focusing on density, that we make sure we have a series of activities and things to go to around the year. And that's a critical component. It's not going to be the only one, but to driving further economic development. It also, as the Vice-Chancellor said, and as I'll touch on later, is a critical part of the current thinking around how you stimulate innovation and how you stimulate business growth. And having vibrancy and having place is a key part of that. So I'll be touching across today some of the work that the Economic Development Board has been doing with government, with industry, around generating industry and around looking at new ways for businesses to grow at both a very small level of what's needed and at what industries we should be looking at. The Economic Development Board, I know for a lot of people is quite a think of as a mystery, but it is both a board and a task force, a provider of frank and fearless advice to government, and a connector and an ability to work on projects that span across government and industry and where there's no other entity that can drive it in the same kind of way. A piece of work that's been done lately through the Economic Development Board is around the smart specialisation, and led by Professor Joran Roos, a very, very evidence-based study of which industries we can be developing policy around and what we can be looking at. And this touches on what some of the speakers have said today about leveraging the existing capacity that you have in certain industries and using that to drive new industries to create a more complex economy. A complex economy has been shown to increasing GDP per capita, and on that basis we've been looking at how we can focus on the knowledge system that we have and which products to improve that economic complexity and then the income per capita. The strategy identifies industries where South Australia has a global competitive advantage. That is, that it has a greater market share relative to its size of the total global export pool, and also identifies areas where South Australia has that existing technological complexity in that industry. It can look for sectors that are growing globally so that we can focus on not only where we have greater market share, but greater market share in growing sectors. And with that information, then looking at plugging the gaps to create a strong and complex web. So where there is a current export strength in a particular field, and another field that has complementary technological complexity, but no significant advantage, we can focus on accelerating the growth in that so that the two grow in tandem. And we saw this is some of what was said about the hydrogen and the way that some of the knowledge in the technology around that can be used for other industries. We can also focus on developing industries where that technical complexity will enhance the value of one or more of our existing strengths. And this was again touched on by the Vice-Chancellor. Developing particular industries can improve others. So, for example, development of a drone industry can link defence, agriculture and mining and support all of those. The work that's been done and the evidence-based study will then be used to drive policy and programs to actually grow those industries. This will require a combination of the organic growth of local entrepreneurship, developing spin-outs, targeted investment attraction, and a combination of supply and demand side tools. On looking at research and industry and how to better link the two, the Economic Development Board is also currently working with CSIRO to increase its presence in South Australia, to look at areas where CSIRO can actually develop a strong research base and how we can partner with industry to further the business growth in those areas. But they're on the bigger scale of how to focus the industries. There's also the question of how you actually get the startups happening. How do you provide the support that's needed once you've identified those industries? And there are a number of things happening, and there's a number of programs and initiatives, which if you look at the Innovation SA website, you can find a discussion of. Some of the things that we've thought that a lot of businesses need early on is obviously access to capital. And there's a number of different funds that are working towards providing capital. So South Australia's Early Commercialisation Fund, which can provide grants of $50,000 to $500,000 to support proof of concept product development and commercialisation by the high technology startups. So we've identified the industries, and then you can provide the actual growth needed to start looking at products in those industries. South Australia has also established a $50 million venture capital fund. It is the only sovereign venture capital fund that is managed in the world that is managed by private industry. By a private venture capital fund, Blue Sky Venture Capital. And they are focusing on looking for where those early stage startups are and how they can actually use that capital to help them grow. And part of their work, as they go on, as they're based in looking at the South Australian industries, will be thinking how they can be a part of fostering those industries and connecting the dots between different groups. There's an infrastructure piece to this as well, to stimulating innovation and entrepreneurship. And that's a physical infrastructure and a digital infrastructure. We've heard about the potential of the old hospital site, and I think that that is a critical thing to get right for the state. But it should also be noted that I've been working around the nation on a number of major urban city development projects, and all around the country they are looking, when there is a major urban city project, looking at how you actually get that mix of startups, of research, and of companies that have something in common to drive the new innovation growth. So that is something that we're not unique in that, but we've got to do it right. We have to keep doing it. And more as well, looking around the country, some of those major sites, governments are starting to look at not just what is the highest land payment that can be got from developing that site through charging the highest commercial rents, but how do you actually have joint partnerships to stimulate social and economic growth? So different models of how you develop those for different long-term outcomes. And we need to be thinking like that and making sure the choices we make on that site, including the underpinning financials and what we're looking for, are going to reflect the outcome that we want. Tonsley is actually the first innovation precinct in Australia, and it is an amazing example of the theory around this. And we need to keep investing in Tonsley and keep telling that story. It's now becoming a study and a precinct that other people around the country are looking at, and we should be really proud of that. There's more and more going on at Tonsley, including that's leveraging off some of what we've heard today in the Industry 4.0 and the Tonsley Manufacturing Innovation Hub. For businesses that currently exist, there's a number of activities and programs that happen at Tonsley that can help businesses address the challenges that they're facing in shifting to different technology. The Future Factory that has recently been founded at Tonsley enables an education and training tool for businesses to understand how they might bring some of the new technologies into their business and use that to drive growth. These are all examples of the physical manifestation of putting education, research, startups, mature companies together to build off each other. But there's a digital infrastructure piece as well that relates to global connectivity, and a lot of this has been driven by our Chief Innovation Officer. But Adelaide will become a gig city, which will offer download speeds 10 times those of the national broadband network to innovation precincts in Adelaide. They will be rolled out to 25 sites. And the benefits of having fast internet is not just faster email and faster browsing, but actually the ability that it gives to test and to make use of the technological advances in AR that we're seeing now. This is a really critical piece that everybody will need to be taking advantage of the new technologies that are going to be driving the innovation and growth of the future. The Economic Development Board and the Department of State Development are also investigating the possibility of 5G mobile technologies for South Australian industry and looking at early deployment of those programs in particular locations that can help focus on industries and help grow those industries and get us ahead in those spaces. Pulling all of the parts together from looking at what the bigger industry shifts are, what the global shifts are, where we should play in that, and then how we are going to play in that and how we're going to encourage people to play in that are critical parts of driving the economy forward. And I'm pleased with everything I've heard from the speakers today that everybody seems to be aligned in talking about the partnerships that are required between all sectors of society. It's not a public versus private debate. It's not an us versus them on any of it. It's all of us working together for the future of South Australia.